The difference between the poor, the middle class, and the wealthy isn't money. It's not where they live or what they drive. It's how they think. Their philosophy about time, money, effort, and value. You could take all the money from a wealthy thinker, and they'd build it back. But give a poor thinker a fortune, and soon enough, it disappears. Because the poor think survival. The middle class think comfort. And the wealthy, they think freedom, growth, legacy. They ask different questions. They make different decisions. And over time, that difference becomes a lifetime. Today, we're not just going to talk about money. We're going to talk about mindsets, because once the mind changes, everything else follows. So today, let's not study wealth as a number. Let's study it as a way of life, a pattern of thought, discipline, and vision that separates not just bank accounts, but destinies. You see, I've spent time in all three circles, the poor, the middle class, and the wealthy. I've had conversations in small towns and big cities with men who had nothing and with men who had empires. And over the years, I noticed a striking pattern. It wasn't about accent or education or even age. It was about content, the content of their minds flowing effortlessly through their mouths. The poor, in most cases, talk about people. What she did, what he said, who's to blame, who's winning, and who's failing. Gossip, blame, and opinion dressed up as fact. Now, it may feel innocent in the moment, even entertaining, but here's the truth. When your thoughts are stuck on other people's choices, you stop creating your own. And the tragedy is, the more time you spend in that kind of talk, the more you reinforce a victim mindset, one where life happens to you, not through you. Move up a level and you'll find the middle class. These are good people working hard, doing their best. But listen closely and you'll notice their conversations revolve around things. The new car, the big house, the weekend plans, how much the shoes cost, or the features of the latest phone. There's pride in possession, and it becomes the center of attention. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying nice things. I've owned some nice things myself. But when your focus is solely on accumulation, you end up mistaking lifestyle for wealth. You spend what you earn to impress people who aren't even paying attention. And the trap? It feels like progress, but it's a treadmill, expensive, exhausting, and stationary. But climb one more level, and the air changes. The wealthy talk about ideas, not just dollars and cents, but philosophy, systems, legacy, impact. They ask different questions. How can we solve this problem better? What if we did it this way? What's the opportunity that everyone else is missing? Their words aren't filled with people or things. They're filled with thought, strategy, curiosity, vision. And when you spend enough time with this group, you'll notice their minds are builders. They're not just living in the world, they're reshaping it. I remember being invited to a gathering early in my journey. The room was full of men and women who had built something from nothing, business owners, investors, thinkers, and I'll never forget how out of place I felt. Not because I didn't have the suit or the vocabulary, but because the conversation was different. They weren't talking about anyone's personal life. They weren't talking about what they bought or what they wore. They were talking about what they were learning, what they were building, what they believed was coming next. One man said, "The marketplace pays you for solving problems. So if you want to make more money, stop watching people and start solving problems." That one idea changed the entire trajectory of my career. And that's the heart of it. Conversations shape consciousness. What you focus on, you multiply. The poor stay poor not just because of lack of money, but because of a repeated focus on people, on drama, on distractions. The middle class gets stuck chasing things, mistaking income for freedom. But the wealthy train their minds to stay on ideas, on purpose, on leverage, on contribution. And in doing so, they create lives of expansion. So if you want to shift your life, start with your language. Change what you talk about when it's casual. Catch yourself mid-sentence. If you find yourself criticizing someone, switch the channel. If you catch yourself talking about stuff, Ask instead, what's the big idea behind this? And if you want to accelerate your growth, surround yourself with those who challenge your thinking, not your wardrobe, because what you speak becomes what you seek, and what you seek eventually becomes your reality. I learned early on that money doesn't behave unless you teach it how to. It doesn't grow unless you assign it a job. Most people think they need more income to get ahead, but what they really need is more direction. You can drown in a sea of money if you don't know how to sail the boat. I've met people making $40,000 a year with wealth building habits, and I've met others making $400,000 a year still stuck in the same financial hole. The difference? Allocation. When I was broke, I didn't just need more cash, I needed a better philosophy. And one of the best shifts I made was moving from emotional spending to strategic allocation. I began dividing every dollar by purpose. Not by habit, not by desire, but by discipline. One of the methods I adopted was a simple structure. 50% to essentials, your living costs, your needs, your basics, not wants, needs. Then 20% toward investments money that goes out and brings friends back. Another 20% to personal growth books, seminars, education, mentors. Because if you want to have more, you've got to become more. And the final 10%, giving. Yes, giving. Because wealth without generosity becomes a prison. And generosity isn't something you start once you're rich. It's something you practice so you remember why you're building in the first place. Now, some might say, I can't afford to invest or give my income's too small. But that's the point. It's never about the amount. It's about the attitude. If you won't give a dime out of a dollar, you won't give 10,000 out of 100,000. And if you don't invest $50 a month when you have it, you won't suddenly start when you're making six figures. The habit must come before the harvest. I remember a young man who came up to me after a seminar. He said, I don't need a budget, I just keep an eye on things. I asked him how that was working out. He said, I always run out of money before the month ends. I smiled and said, exactly. Because money flows where attention goes, but without structure, that attention becomes chaos. He was treating his finances like a casual acquaintance, not a business partner. The moment he started giving every dollar an assignment, his entire trajectory changed. See, the wealthy think in systems. They don't ask, can I afford this? They ask, does this fit my allocation? That's a very different question. One comes from impulse, the other from intelligence. The poor often react emotionally to money, spending to feel better, to look better, to escape. But emotion without boundaries is destruction. The wealthy understand that every dollar you earn is a seed. And if you eat all your seed, you'll have no harvest. But if you plant it strategically, consistently, you'll grow orchards. Another powerful idea, automate what matters. Set up automatic transfers for savings, investments, education, and giving. Why? Because discipline doesn't always show up, but systems do. When the structure is in place, even your lazy days become productive. The middle class thinks budgeting is about restriction, about saying no. The wealthy know it's about direction, about saying yes to the right things. And remember, a budget isn't just about money, it's about vision. It's telling your future self, I've got your back. It's building something before you need it. Most people don't plan for emergencies, they react to them. But those who succeed long-term are proactive. They plan, prepare, allocate, and build long before the storm shows up. So here's the challenge. Don't let another month go by without telling your money what to do. Don't treat your finances like a mystery. Make them a mission. And when you do, you'll discover that the power was never in the paycheck. It was always in the plan. It's not debt that destroys people. It's the misuse of debt. The truth is, debt is neither good nor bad by itself. It's a tool. And like any tool, it depends on the hand that holds it. A hammer can build a house or tear one down. Same with debt. Now, here's what separates the poor from the wealthy. The poor use debt to consume, the wealthy use debt to construct. One buries, the other builds. Most people don't understand that borrowing money is not the problem. It's why you borrow that makes the difference. I've watched folks put $1,200 handbags on a credit card with 23% interest, and they'll be paying for it long after the bag goes out of style. I've seen people stretch themselves thin just to drive a car that impresses the neighbor but not the accountant. That's consumer debt. That's debt for things that go down in value the minute you swipe the card. But I've also watched the wealthy take on millions in debt and grow wealth faster than most people can imagine. How? They use leverage, not liability. They borrow money for things that generate income, things that appreciate over time, real estate that pays rent, businesses that produce cash flow, investments that yield more than the cost to borrow. They ask, will this debt pay me more than it costs me? If the answer is yes, that's not a burden. That's a strategy. Let me take you back. When I started learning about money, I was like most folks, skeptical of debt. I thought all debt was a trap, and for most it is. But not because of the debt itself, it's because of the mindset behind it. The poor look at credit as a way to live today at tomorrow's expense. But the wealthy look at leverage as a way to expand tomorrow by using today's tools. One of the best lessons I learned was this: never go into debt for something that won't pay you back. If it doesn't produce income, if it doesn't grow in value, if it doesn't put money in your pocket, it's a liability, not an investment. And I don't care how good it looks on social media. You can't finance a wealthy life on image. You build it on structure, substance, and strategy. I remember a time when I borrowed money not for a car, not for a vacation, but to attend a business conference. It was a stretch. Money was tight. But I believed the knowledge and network would pay dividends. And it did. That one decision led to a partnership that changed my life. See, not all debt is dumb. Some debt is the bridge between where you are and where you could be if you use it wisely. Now, let's talk numbers. If you're paying 18% on credit card debt and earning 7% in the market, you're going backwards. But if you borrow at 4% to invest in a property that pays you 12% net returns, that's smart leverage. That's using the system to your advantage. But again, it starts with understanding. You've got to study the rules of the game. Learn interest rates, cash flow, opportunity cost, because when you understand the math, you stop making emotional decisions. Here's another mistake I see. People borrow for consumption, then call it investment. They'll say, this new phone is an investment. No, it's an expense. The difference is simple. Investments return money, expenses take it. The wealthy are always calculating ROI, return on investment. I'm not against enjoying life, but I am against enjoying it at the cost of your future. The goal is to live well today without stealing from tomorrow. And you can do that if you learn to use debt like a builder, not a buyer. You can leverage other people's money, but only if you've developed the discipline to manage your own first. So here's the bottom line. Debt is not your enemy, ignorance is. And the solution isn't fear, it's wisdom. Ask yourself, is this debt building me or burying me? Is it funding assets or funding appetites? Because the answer to that question will shape your financial destiny far more than your income ever will. It's a simple principle, but it changes lives. It's not about how much you make, it's how you manage what you make. I've seen people making six figures end up broke, and people making modest wages end up wealthy. And the difference wasn't luck. It wasn't background. It wasn't even intelligence. It was discipline. It was philosophy. It was a simple shift in how they handled their money the moment it came in. Most people live by a backward formula. They earn, they spend, and if anything's left, they might save it. But let me tell you something about that approach. It guarantees there will never be much left. Expenses always expand to meet income unless you tell them otherwise. The poor spend first and hope for leftovers. The rich, those who understand how wealth is built, they save first. They pay themselves before they pay anyone else. That's what changed my life. I started saving before I thought I had enough to save. That was the test. You don't wait until it's convenient to be wise. You act wisely even when it's inconvenient. When I was a kid, I had a mentor tell me, take 10% of every dollar you earn and make sure it never sees the light of day. At the time, it felt impossible. I was living paycheck to paycheck. But I tried it. I made it non-negotiable. First check I wrote? To myself. Savings. Like it was a bill I couldn't skip. And you know what? The world didn't end. In fact, my world started to change. What happens when you save first is more than financial, it's psychological. You start to see yourself as someone with a future. You begin to plan, not just react. You stop living just to survive the month and begin preparing to shape your decade. Saving first builds identity. It says, I'm responsible. I'm not at the mercy of the economy. I have reserves. I have direction. The poor often say, I'll save when I make more. But that's like saying, I'll get in shape when I feel like exercising. Doesn't work that way. If you can't save $1 out of 10, you won't save 10 out of 100 or 10,000 out of 100,000. Money multiplies who you are. If you're undisciplined with little, you'll be undisciplined with much. The amount doesn't fix the habit fixes the amount. One of the smartest things you can do is automate your savings. Set it up so a percentage comes out before you ever see it. Hide it from your emotions. Make it invisible to temptation. Because here's the truth, if it stays in your checking account, your desires will find a way to spend it. That new gadget, that tempting sale, that weekend getaway, it'll all come knocking. But if you never see the money, you never miss it. And over time, that invisible money becomes visible wealth. The rich also understand this. Money not only buys things, it buys time, freedom, opportunity. Every dollar saved today is a brick in the foundation of future independence. And when you have savings, you make different decisions. You negotiate better. You walk away from bad deals. You sleep better. You're not a slave to every emergency or opportunity. You operate from power, not panic. Now, I'm not telling you to live like a miser. I'm telling you to live with a strategy. Save first, then build your lifestyle around what's left. And guess what? What's left is often more than enough because you're not stretching yourself thin trying to impress people who don't pay your bills. There's peace in restraint, and that peace is wealth in itself. I remember meeting a man in his 30s who had already become financially independent. He wasn't a tech genius. He wasn't born into money. But he followed one rule relentlessly: save first. Every bonus, every raise, every side income, he paid himself first and he did it consistently. That's the game. That's how it's played at the highest level. So don't underestimate this principle because it sounds simple. That's the trap. The fundamentals are easy to understand but hard to live out. But once you make this shift, you begin to control money instead of money controlling you. Save first. Make it sacred. Make it automatic. And watch your life begin to change, not overnight, but inevitably. One of the greatest shifts in my financial life came when I learned to define things not by how they looked, but by how they behaved. You see, most people are trained to chase appearances. The shiny car, the big house, the branded clothes, because they've been told that these are signs of success. But the truth is, wealth isn't about looking rich. It's about being rich. And if you want to be rich, you've got to understand the difference between a liability and an asset. Now, I don't mean the accounting definitions you learn in school. I'm talking about practical, street-level definitions. Something very simple. If it puts money into your pocket, it's an asset. If it takes money out of your pocket, it's a liability. And that one idea, if you really let it sink in, could change your entire financial destiny. The middle class spends their life buying liabilities, and they often think they're buying assets. That's the dangerous part. They buy a house with a 30-year mortgage and say it's their biggest asset, but they're paying for it every month for decades. They buy a brand new car that loses thousands in value the moment it leaves the lot, and they say, look at my investment. But it's not paying them. It's draining them. Now let's contrast that with the wealthy. The wealthy are obsessed with assets, and not just assets that sit around looking pretty. Assets that produce, assets that pay, real estate that brings in rent, stocks that pay dividends, businesses that earn while they sleep, intellectual property that earns royalties long after the work is done. They don't spend money. They position money. I had a mentor once tell me, every dollar is a little worker. And every time you spend one, it either goes out and brings back friends, or it goes out and never returns. Most people send their dollars out to die. The wealthy send their dollars out to multiply. That's the philosophy. And it's available to anyone willing to think long term. You see, the middle class buys things that feel good. The wealthy buy things that perform well. It's a difference in emotional discipline. One is about instant gratification, the other's about delayed reward. That's why a wealthy thinker might drive a modest car and live in a reasonable home, but own a dozen rental properties. The middle class sees the lifestyle. The wealthy see the cash flow. I remember being tempted early on by the flash of success. I started making money, and the first thing I wanted to do was prove it. Fancy suits, expensive furniture, big television, things that said, I've arrived. But none of those things made me any richer. In fact, they slowed me down. It took a mindset reset. I had to start asking, will this take money out of my pocket, or will it put some back in? That question changed everything. Here's the practical strategy. Before you buy anything expensive, ask yourself, is this an asset or a liability? And not in theory, but in cash. Does it earn? Does it appreciate? Does it cash flow? Or does it cost you to maintain, fuel, insure, store, or repair? And if it's a liability, it doesn't mean you can't ever buy it, but you must buy it with money produced by assets. One of the greatest financial habits you can build is this. Buy assets first, let those assets produce income, and then use that income for luxuries. That's real wealth. That's when you've created a machine that feeds itself. Until then, you're just spinning the wheel, hoping the next raise, the next job, the next bonus will finally make things easier. But ease doesn't come from earning more. It comes from managing better. I've met teachers who became wealthy because they invested small amounts consistently in income-generating assets. I've met business owners who made millions and lost it all because they kept buying liabilities. It's not income. It's mindset. It's not salary. It's philosophy. So take inventory of your financial life. Look at what you own. Ask yourself, is this helping me become free, or is it keeping me stuck? Because freedom is the ultimate goal. And freedom only comes when your assets do the working and you do the living. The rule is simple. Don't let your lifestyle grow faster than your asset column. Grow your income-producing assets first and let them fund the rest. That's how the wealthy play the game, and that's how you win it. One of the greatest revelations I ever had in my journey to financial freedom was this. If you only earn when you work, then you'll never stop working. That's not wealth. That's survival with a paycheck. And unfortunately, it's where most people live their entire lives. Trading time for money. They clock in, they clock out, and they get paid for their hours. The problem is, there are only so many hours in the day, and only so much energy in your body. If your income is tied solely to your effort, then your earning has a ceiling. And worse, your freedom has a chain. Now, don't misunderstand me. There is nothing wrong with work. Work is noble. Work builds character. But wealth doesn't come just from labor, it comes from leverage. At some point, if you want freedom, real freedom, you must find a way to earn without being present. You've got to build or buy something that continues to produce, whether you're awake or asleep, sick or healthy, traveling or resting. That's the shift. Using money to buy back time, instead of constantly using time to chase money. The poor mindset thinks, how much can I make per hour? The rich mindset thinks, how can I build something that pays me whether I'm there or not? That's the difference. That's the doorway to wealth. I remember when I first started in business, I was doing everything myself, making calls, packaging products, handling orders. And I thought, this is what hard work looks like. But soon I realized that if I wanted to grow, I couldn't be the engine and the wheels and the driver. I had to build a machine, something that could run even when I wasn't turning the crank. That's when I started studying systems. How do you hire right? How do you delegate? How do you automate? How do you invest in things that produce without your constant touch? I started to understand that time was my most valuable asset, not money. Because money, you can lose and make again. But time, once it's spent, it's gone. That realization changed my behavior. I started asking better questions. Is this task worth my hour? Could someone else do this better, faster, cheaper? Is this effort moving me closer to freedom or just making me feel busy? And then I started redirecting my money to buy leverage. I hired people. I invested in businesses. I created products that sold themselves long after the work was done. I wrote content that continued to inspire and earn. Slowly but surely, the scale tipped. My time was no longer chained to my income, and that, my friends, is wealth. You see, the poor often trade their whole lives just to survive. The middle class may trade up for comfort, but the wealthy, they build so they can be free. Free to think, to travel, to create, to rest, to live deliberately. That's what money can buy you if you use it right. Not just things, but time. And time is where life actually happens. You must stop thinking like a worker and start thinking like a builder. Stop asking, what's the next job? And start asking, what's the next system? Build a course, start a service business, write a book, invest in a rental property, buy dividend-paying stocks, whatever suits your path. But make sure it works for you, even when you're not working. Because let me tell you something. If you don't learn to buy time, you'll spend your life spending time. And eventually, you'll run out. The goal isn't to retire at 65 because you have to. The goal is to live free at 35 because you chose to. That doesn't mean you stop working. It means you start choosing what work to do, how to do it, and why to do it. That's the kind of life you build when you understand how to use money to create time. So take a close look at your calendar and your bank statement. They will tell you exactly what you value most. Are you building systems or just showing up for shifts? Are you buying time or just spending it faster than you earn? Freedom doesn't come from a higher hourly rate. It comes from breaking the hour altogether. One of the sneakiest enemies of wealth is what I call lifestyle creep. It's when your income goes up and your expenses rise right along with it. Make a little more, spend a little more, get a raise, buy the newer car, earn a bonus, upgrade the vacation. Before long, no matter how much you earn, you're still broke, just in nicer clothes, with fancier problems. And the worst part is it all feels justified because the money's coming in. But it's not staying in, that's the difference. The poor and middle class fall into this trap all the time. They mistake income for success and lifestyle for wealth. But the truth is, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep and how wisely you multiply it. You don't grow rich by increasing lifestyle every time the paycheck grows. You grow rich by putting a ceiling on lifestyle and letting the overflow build your future. The wealthy operate differently. They draw a line and say, this is enough. They set a cap on lifestyle, not based on how much they make, but based on how much they need to live well. And everything above that cap, it goes to work. It builds. It compounds. It buys freedom. See, discipline isn't about depriving yourself. It's about deciding what truly matters. It's about choosing long-term gain over short-term applause. I remember a time when my business had its first big surge in profits. The natural instinct was to reward myself. That's what I'd always seen growing up, celebrate every increase with a new toy. But I paused and asked a better question. What do I want more, a temporary upgrade or permanent freedom? I decided to hold the line. I didn't move into a bigger house. I didn't upgrade the car. I didn't inflate my lifestyle to match the new income. Instead, I started increasing my investments. I let the gap between earnings and lifestyle widen. And over time, that gap became wealth. Lifestyle creep isn't just about spending money. It's a mindset of consumption over creation of impressing others instead of securing yourself. When every dollar goes out to maintain an image, you lose the chance to build a foundation. But when you practice restraint, when you say, "This is enough for now," you gain something much more valuable than another gadget or getaway. You gain momentum. The wealthy understand that freedom is bought with discipline. They keep fixed costs low. They automate saving and investing. They avoid unnecessary upgrades. They ask themselves, will this expense serve my vision or steal from it? And more often than not, they choose the future. Now, this doesn't mean you can't enjoy life. It's not about living like a monk or denying yourself joy. It's about being intentional. It's about knowing the difference between pleasure and progress. It's about aligning your spending with your purpose, not your impulses. The key is to set a lifestyle cap, an intentional ceiling that protects your wealth-building engine. Once your needs and modest wants are covered, let the rest go to work for you. Buy assets. Fund investments. Build systems. Plant trees that bear fruit year after year. If you're always consuming the fruit, you'll never build the orchard. Most people live as though every new dollar must find a new expense. But imagine if every new dollar became a new seed planted into something that would grow. That's how wealth works. Not all at once, but little by little, quietly, consistently, through the power of keeping more than you spend. So ask yourself, if your income doubled tomorrow, what would you do? Would you spend twice as much, or would you invest twice as aggressively? That answer says everything about where your mindset currently lives in, the path to comfort or the path to freedom. Discipline isn't flashy. It doesn't get standing ovations, but it builds the kind of wealth that doesn't need to be shown off because it speaks for itself. So hold the line, cap your lifestyle, and let your wealth grow in silence until it speaks so loudly you never have to explain it. Because true wealth isn't loud, it's secure. If there's one thing I've learned about success, it's that you can't out-earn ignorance. You might get lucky for a while. You might stumble into a good paycheck or find yourself in the right place at the right time. But without understanding the rules of money, how it works, how to grow it, how to protect it, you'll always be one decision away from losing it all. The wealthy know this. That's why they treat financial education as a lifelong commitment, not a one-time event. It's not something you do once, it's something you live. Now, let's talk about how the middle class approaches this. Most of the time, they believe that once school ends, learning ends. They go through 12 years of school, maybe 4 years of college, and then they assume the learning chapter is closed. They say things like, "I'm not good with money," or "I'll let someone else handle my finances." And that's where the danger begins. Because if you don't understand money, someone else will profit from your confusion. The credit card companies, the banks, the flashy marketers, they all understand what you don't, and they use it. I remember when I was broke and frustrated, wondering why my hard work wasn't paying off. I was working full-time, showing up early, staying late, but my bank account never grew. Then a mentor told me something that changed everything. He said, if you want to be wealthy, study wealth. If you want to be free, study freedom. Don't just work hard, work smart. Learn the game. And so I did. I picked up every book I could on money, investing, real estate, tax strategy, and business. I listened to tapes in my car, took notes, highlighted pages. I became a student again, not in a classroom, but in life. And slowly things began to shift. See, financial education isn't about memorizing stock symbols or becoming a Wall Street expert. It's about understanding principles. It's about knowing how compound interest works. It's about grasping the difference between good debt and bad debt. It's about building a system for your money, one that doesn't rely on willpower alone. It's about learning to protect yourself from emotional decisions, predatory contracts, and financial traps. The wealthy don't avoid this, they lean into it. They know that the greatest ROI isn't always from an investment. Sometimes it's from an insight. One new idea, one shift in thinking can unlock decades of freedom. So they read the books, they talk to mentors, they attend the workshops, they ask questions, they stay curious. They don't assume they've arrived, they know there's always more to learn. Let me tell you something I've noticed. Wealth and wisdom often walk hand in hand. Not because the rich are smarter, but because they make learning a habit. They dedicate time every week, sometimes every day, to expanding their knowledge. They treat their mind like a bank account, knowing that the more they deposit, the more valuable it becomes. On the other hand, when people ignore financial education, they often fall into the same patterns year after year, overspending, undersaving, chasing quick wins, avoiding the fine print. They think financial literacy is optional until it becomes urgent. And by then, it's usually too late to avoid the consequences. That's the price of ignoring the game. So what's the shift? It's simple. Don't wait for crisis to become your teacher. Choose to learn before you're forced to. Make it a priority, not when you have time, but because it will buy you time. If you can spend an hour watching a show, you can spend 15 minutes reading about how to protect your money. If you can scroll social media, you can scroll through a chapter in a book that might change your life. It's not about time, it's about value. And the wealthy value education because they know ignorance is expensive. The good news is, we live in a time where knowledge is everywhere. Podcasts, courses, books, mentors, they're all within reach. The only question is, will you reach for them? Will you make self-education a part of your routine, your rhythm, your reality? Because at the end of the day, you can't hand your financial future to luck. You've got to take hold of it with wisdom, with intention, and with discipline. Don't just work for money. Learn how money works. It's the shortest path from survival to success. One of the greatest illusions in the world of money is that high income equals wealth. That's not true, not even close. I've met people earning six figures who are flat broke. Why? Because they spend every dollar they earn and then some. They drive the best cars, wear the finest clothes, live in the nicest homes, all rented or financed. They look rich, but they're living on a financial edge so sharp that one unexpected expense could cut their whole world in half. You see, income is not the measure, wealth is. The poor and middle class tend to focus on income. Their entire financial identity is tied to how much they make. You ask them about their financial status, and they'll tell you what they earn per month. But earning is just one piece of the puzzle. What you keep, what you grow, what you own, that's what tells the real story. You can't build freedom on a paycheck alone. The wealthy understand this deeply. They don't just ask, how much am I making? They ask, what is my net worth? That's the scorecard. Assets minus liabilities. Ownership, equity, cash flow. That's what builds legacy. That's what buys time. That's what lets you sleep well at night. I remember early in my journey, I thought the solution to all my problems was to make more money. And so I did. I worked harder, picked up extra hours, took on more responsibility. My income went up, but strangely, my stress did too. I was earning more, but I was spending more. I hadn't learned the principle. One day, a mentor pulled me aside and said, "You're playing the wrong game. You're chasing dollars instead of building wealth." That stopped me cold, and it changed my whole approach. Wealth isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. It accumulates quietly through consistent, intentional decisions. The wealthy live below their means, even when their means increase. They put their money into assets, real estate, stocks, businesses, intellectual property that grow in value and produce income whether they're working or not. They focus on building a machine that works for them, not just a job that demands more from them. And here's the ironism of the wealthiest people I know don't have the highest income, but they have the highest ownership. They own property, shares, systems, products. Their money is working harder than they do. Their time is leveraged. Their life is more free. On the other hand, some of the highest earners I know are trapped in golden handcuffs. They've built a lifestyle that requires constant income just to sustain. The house payment, the car leases, the private school sit, all looks impressive until the income stops. And when it does, the whole thing collapses like a house of cards. So what's the better approach? Track your net worth, not just your income. Know the value of your assets. Understand your debts. Build ownership. Start small if you must. Buy 1 share of stock. Put $100 toward a mutual fund. Invest in your skills so you can create something of your own as service. A course, a book, a business. It's not about how much, it's about momentum. And stop trying to impress people with what you spend. Instead, impress yourself with what you keep, with what you grow, with what you own. Net worth is built in the shadows, through discipline, through consistency, through long-term thinking. It's not glamorous, but it's powerful. One of the smartest moves you can make is to stop asking, how much did I make this month? And start asking, how much closer am I to financial independence? That shift in question can change your life. Because income will feed you for a day, but ownership will feed you for a lifetime. So when you're tempted to chase another raise or splurge on another luxury, pause and ask yourself, is this helping me build wealth or just spend earnings? The answer to that question will often tell you what mindset you're operating from and where you'll end up if you keep thinking that way. You don't build true freedom with paychecks. You build it with principles. You build it with ownership. You build it by focusing on net worth, not just income. Let me leave you with something simple but powerful. You don't have to be born rich to become wealthy. You just have to start thinking differently. Wealth isn't a matter of luck. It's a matter of philosophy. It's a daily decision to grow yourself, to master your habits, and to treat money not as something you chase, but something you direct with wisdom and purpose. The difference between the poor, the middle class, and the wealthy is not how much they have in their bank accounts, it's how they use their minds. It's what they value. It's what they talk about, what they study, what they do with their time, and how they see the future. The poor often live in reaction, waiting, hoping, blaming. The middle class lives in comfort, earning, spending, maintaining. But the wealthy, they live with vision, they plant, they grow, they create, they multiply. And the best part? Anyone can start shifting their mindset today. You don't need a windfall to start building wealth. You need clarity, you need discipline, you need a strategy. You need the courage to ask more from yourself and to stop settling for less than you're capable of becoming. That's the first decision, to take responsibility for your financial future and not hand it over to chance or anyone else. So, start where you are. Track your spending. Learn the rules. Build your first asset. Set a goal. Read a book. Talk about ideas. Pay yourself first. Hold back lifestyle. Think in decades. Delay gratification. Master your emotions. All these small acts of discipline, repeated daily, shape the mindset of wealth. You don't need to do everything overnight, but you do need to begin. Remember, the greatest gap in life is not between rich and poor, it's between knowing and doing. Don't just hear these ideas, act on them. Build habits that align with the wealthy. Think long, act smart, and become the kind of person success is attracted to. If you do that, if you commit fully, you won't just change your bank account, you'll change your life.